I would like to introduce one of the final sessions of the day, a panel on polyglots at work. Polyglots using their language skills in interesting or unusual ways. So we'll hear from each panelist for a brief period, and then we will open the floor to questions. So if you would like a polyglot career makeover or something in that vein, that could be your opportunity. All right, we have a wonderful array of language careerists. I don't know, is that a terrible way to put it? On the far left here, we have Laurence Bouvard, who is a voiceover artist and linguist. Next to her, we have immigrant advocate Stefanie Trice Gill. I don't know if any of you know the person on the far right. Richard Simcott, the organizer of this conference, the founder of this conference series. He speaks a lot of languages. He is the head of languages at Emoderation and a language consultant, and I will leave it, we're going to begin on the left, your right, and I'll get off the stage.
Salam, maharba, ni hao. How is everybody doing? You've made it to the end of the day? I just want to say thank you to Richard and to Alex, and especially to Ellen for inviting me here, because Ellen is an old classmate of mine. So it's really cool to be here and to see this amazing conference that she's organized, and to share my passions with you. So I have a degree in linguistics from Harvard, a master's in computer science from the University of London, a diploma in translation. I've studied 18 languages, 5 computer languages, and a sign language. And I do funny voices for a living. So what has gone wrong? A question my family often asks me. So I grew up in a multilingual household. I'm not doing these slides right. Let me just show you. So I grew up in a multilingual household. My father's French, my mother's Italian, my grandmother spoke German, there was some Slovene. So my big motivator to learn languages was to find out what the grown-ups were talking about, because they did that annoying code switching thing of the children are around, will speak French. So when I went to Harvard, I wanted to do linguistics because I felt like that would give me a way into all languages. And I also really loved math and science, as I know a lot of you probably do as well. You like structures. So when I finished, I took that natural career progression and decided to become an actress. I had always loved language, and actually performing is all about language. So I decided, well, I'm going to get this out of my system. I put my PhD on hold for a year, and I went to London to train at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. Got a West End show, and never came home. So the interesting thing about being in London, looking the way I do, having a foreign name, nobody thought I was American, because I didn't look like their idea of an American, which is obviously blonde-haired and blue-eyed with big teeth. True story. So I played a lot of Spanish, a lot of Italian, a lot of French, which is okay, but as Maria the Maid, you only have about 3 lines. So then I discovered I had the perfect face for audio, and I moved into voiceovers. And actually, that has been amazing, because it's where both my passions have come into play. So in my work, I use languages in 3 ways. And one is the obvious way, is that I actually speak the languages. So there was a movie a few years ago called Tales of Despero, and I did a fabulous little website for them where a child could put in their name, and I would narrate a story with their name. And I did that in English and in French and Italian, and I think we may have even done the Spanish version. And I'm also working on an app for kids called Hopster, which is in French. However, the thing about doing voiceovers is you not only have to have a command of your language, you have to be perfect at your language. And as all of us multi-language learners know, you can be perfect at maybe 2, possibly 3, but you're not going to be perfect at more than that. And also being based in London, you have the entire world there. So I don't do as much in the language work. The one area where I do a lot of is something called ADR, which is additional dialogue replacement for films and for TV. And what we do there is, if a movie is shot all over the world and there's a scene in, say, Morocco or Turkey or Spain, we'll go in and we'll do a bit of dialogue in the background that can be played. There's a movie coming out at the end of the month starring Mr. Daniel Craig. Enough said, it's all over the world, and we did a lot for that. But most of my work isn't so much speaking the language, it's using the language. So another way that I use the language a lot is in dubbing. Why would I need to know the language? Well, I have a language yammering in my ear, and I'm trying to match it to the person on the screen. And I'm not just matching the mouth, I'm matching the meaning. So if I have a subtitle this big that I have to say in this amount of time, and in some of these films, like in the Persian films, they talk and talk and talk, and I have to match, I have to know when to start and end. It's really important to know what's going on in my ear. So for those languages, I may not be able to speak them as well, but I can understand them, and it's really important that I do. The final way I use it, which is actually a big way, is actually putting an accent on a language, and that I do a lot of. So a few years back, I did Robot Boy for Cartoon Network, which a few of you may know. I am Robot Boy. I'm a small blue robot. I'm also Robot Girl. Yes, this is why my parents sent me to Harvard. But for that, what I did was I'd studied Japanese, and I just used the rhythms and the phonetics of the language to lay over it. It was in English, but it has a Japanese flavor. It's the same thing for I did Beatrice in Broken Sword, Sleeping Dragon. She's French. I just put the French on and put a bit of flavor of French. I am, Lord help me, Dream Genie in a new game called Block and Load, and I got to use my Arabic, so that was very exciting for me. And I'm only using a little bit of Arabic there, but there's a flavor in it. And I do lots of that, and it's very fun. And the thing about it is that I don't need to have a massive knowledge of the language. I need to be able to do research and understand it. And I've worked in dozens of languages that I only kind of know, but it doesn't matter because I know how to unpack it. So, how do you unpack it? So these are the skills that I need for my job. And this is really where my passion comes in, because I get to use my linguistics degree. Really, Mom and Dad, I get to use my linguistics degree. And I get my acting skills in. So first of all, you do need to know phonetics, syntax, grammar. Why? You need to take the phonetics of the source language, be it French or Persian, and lay it on the target language, which means you have to have a knowledge of what would a speaker of Farsi do in English. Would they drop the articles? Would they drop the ends of words? Would they change T's to D's? So you need to know that kind of stuff. You need to have an absolute command of the target language. So if you're working in English, you need to know how to manipulate it inside and out. You need to be able to do research. There's a wonderful website I use called IDEA, I-D-E-A, which is a repository of accents and language samples, and it is marvelous. I think it's University of Kansas. It's free, and you can listen to samples of English and all sorts of other languages. But you also need to be a trained performer. It's no good having lots of language knowledge if you don't know how to use your instrument. So that's where my drama school training came in, because if I'm doing an audiobook, I'm working 6 hours a day, 4 or 5 days in a row. I have to be able to sustain it. Also, if I'm creating a voice, I need to be able to use the different parts of my instrument. So that's really important too. Ability with text. Now, this isn't just being able to read and sight read. It's also sometimes needing to do localization, because guess what? British English is not American English. Oh, writers in London who write for the American market. So I find a lot of times I'm taking a text that's been given me a script, and I'm having to do it so that an American ear won't go, whilst? Since when does somebody say whilst? Perchance. So I do an awful lot of localization for my work. And then the other thing is really just having fun. You can't be inhibited when you do it. You just have to try crazy things. It's how I got Robot Boy. Because I went in, I said, I was going for another character, and my agent said, just try this. I said, I can't do this. And I went, I put on little voice like this. And the rest was history. So these are some of the characters that I have played. So that's Robot Boy and Robot Girl in the middle. That's Dream Genie in the corner. It's Joanna Dark, because why not? She was American, but why not? You've got Aphrodite up there, who's English. Anybody who's from the UK, yes, I am Nico in the Dolmio campaign for pasta sauce made in Ireland. I have an interesting story about that, is that sometimes your language knowledge can get in the way. So in the ad, I have to say, Daddy, it's my Dolmio. And in Italian, those of you who speak Italian know that the word for daddy is papa. And they said, no, 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 Laurence, why don't you say papa? I said, yes, but papa is the Pope. And they went, we don't care. Nobody in England will know. So in the ad, I say papa. So I'm telling the Pope that it's my mio. And now, hopefully this will work. I'm going to try and play you some of my audio samples. And if this doesn't work, I think I need my techie person here. Help! Techie person. Okay. So these are some of the jobs I've done, which include a BBC radio play, some Robot Boy, the Domio campaign, and other bits and pieces.
Good morning. Sally Nagata speaking. How may I help you? My, that's a fine idea, Mr. Small. A real fine idea. You just give me all the details, and I'll get right back to you.
Take it off, amore. Take it off. You took off my pepperonis. She! Am I not enough? Am I too crispy, too thin? Too thick! Sono grassa! Se pazzo! Watch out! He likes to bite!
Pizza
I
ad.
am your personal genie. My wish is only to please you, master.
Robot boy, hey, routine maintenance. Real boy, no have routine maintenance. Dear Tommy, robot boy go sleep bad, become real boy. We use toilet together when get back. Robot boy, walk in air. Robot boy, afraid eat ice cream. Robot girl, sorry scare robot boy.
I have reached my position, my doctor. Oh, I love it when you're abrupt. You know I would do anything to please you, for my only desire is to make you happy. Very, very happy.
In the south, the bizarre weather continues. Marseille, 20 days of rain. Bordeaux, 30. And across the world, from Beijing to New York, there are reports of earth tremors, floods, typhoons. What next?
Papa, it's a Marco on the phone. Can I go to his house? It's a dormio day today. Hey, Marco, I can't come today.
Thank you very much.
Hi. Thanks for this opportunity, Ellen and Richard and organizers. Thank you so much. My name is Stefanie Trice Gill, and I'm here to talk with you today about my journey, starting in Newark, New Jersey, and ending up in Jackson Heights for meaning, my search for meaning as a polyglot. So I should start by saying it's pretty intimidating to be up here because I'm just a normal polyglot. I'm not a hyper polyglot. I speak 5 languages at an advanced level and a few others that I enjoy hearing or trying or playing around with. But so some years ago, I found myself working in a job that where I wasn't using any of my languages. I was living in Newark, New Jersey, and I was a very immigrant-rich neighborhood, the Ironbound neighborhood of Newark. If you've never been there, it's worth going for some good Portuguese and Brazilian food, and not as many samba clubs now as there were then, but a lot of fun if you can find one. And I was part of a community that included a bunch of Brazilian construction workers, Asian restaurant workers, Haitian cab drivers, just like the people you see in the pictures. And so I had moved there because I had a job in the area, and I thought, hey, this is a chance to figure out what all those bossa nova songs I've been singing mean. And so moved there, started reading the newspapers, morphing my Spanish into Portuñol and eventually into Portuguese. And got to practice different languages wherever I went, but nothing related to career. And as I was living there, I asked myself, what can I do? What can I uniquely do that I don't see anyone doing? I should be able to figure out a way to use my languages and work. Let's see. So my friends from around the world were mostly undocumented, and they were really struggling with whether or not they could go into a hospital to get care. And they didn't know, many of them because they were working in construction or other manual labor jobs, when they got injured, they would just deal with it. And they didn't think, they would ask me, well, I said, well, why don't you go to the hospital? They said, well, we don't know what will happen. Will anyone be able to talk to us? Will we get cared for, or will we get deported? They had no idea, and they asked me, and I said, I don't know either. And I thought, I can do this. I can find out what rights they have, and I can tell them, and I can tell people in different languages. So let me figure out how to work in the field of immigrant health. And it was a nascent field at the time. I realized this was something I could do that would make a difference. So I flash forward 2 years later, I was working in the borough of Queens. This is a little video of my old neighborhood, of the Queens neighborhood. I got hired to oversee immigrant access to public hospitals. Just so happened I had 1 year training interpreters and spoke the right 5 languages, and that was enough to get a pretty good job with a carte blanche to change the system to help deal with a lawsuit. So let's see, how do I play this? Do you know? Bottom left corner, can you help me with that? I'm usually okay with tech, but apologize. Okay. So anyway, it's not as, but I'll talk. Well, so I ended up moving to Jackson Heights. How many of you here have been to Jackson Heights this weekend or plan to go? How many of you have been to Jackson Heights? How many of you have loved Jackson Heights Kebab King and the chai? And anyway, I love there. I ended up living there for close to 4 years. And Jackson Heights is a unique neighborhood where within a few block radius, there's a Mexican neighborhood, a Pakistani community, a Bangladeshi community, a Korean community, a big Thai temple, a Filipino community, a Thai, I mean, it goes on and on and on. And it was a really amazing, invigorating place to live and work. So I'll just give you a quick snap of a video that some hospital staff and I did once around the neighborhood, just to give a flavor. There we go. I think it's going to play. And if it doesn't play, we'll move on. We'll stop with my favorite dahi, the little girl in my favorite dahi puri place that's now closed down, a vegan Indian place that I love. But every day in this job, so I was in charge of overseeing language access in this community and for all the public hospitals of Queens and clinics. And every day I was talking to people from all these communities, overseeing the quality of their health care. And it was incredibly engaging to get the inside scoop from people in their languages about what was wrong with the system. It was really exciting. So I could talk with people on the elevator in all the different languages that happen to match up with people there. These are the languages right now in New York City. Gives you an idea of the diversity. The most diverse county in the world, and the US is Queens. At the time, at least, it was the most linguistically diverse place in the country. And so we, and basically there were a lot of challenges to be able to meet the needs. The first thing I did is develop a simple tool like an I Speak card, developing a multilingual tool that people could use to exercise their right, to assert their right to be able to have services in their language, which is the law in the US. Do things like put out a note that says, speak up, let us know if something's not right in the system. And by doing multilingual things all on one sheet, you could pass them out to everybody and be able to not have to say, oh, where do I find the Russian documents? Where do I find, but creating the standard of just keeping simple, plain language and simple, small bite messages and translating them in this case, 7 languages in this document. And having the consent forms and all the other key documents translated into 12 languages, which are still available in the public hospitals of Queens on the website. So in 2005, the news of what we were doing in Queens made the US and international press. And from there, I had realized we had done the maximum we could in Queens and started thinking bigger. And with economies of scale, I realized we could do the same thing all across New York City public hospitals. So I went to business school, got my MBA, and said, as my capstone said, here's what needs to be done. And I was invited to do it. So I was promoted to do this across all the New York City public hospitals. So this is a look at New York City, whereas Queens was about 40% limited English proficient, meaning that 40% of the people have a right to have services in their language and usually don't get them. We had to turn that around. Across all the 5 boroughs, it's still pretty high. 25% are limited English proficient. Most of them get their care in the public hospitals. So this synergy of getting into that situation where being multilingual helped me pursue my 2 loves, which is language and social justice, was incredibly rewarding. How to do what I think a lot of polyglots are looking for, a synergy that allows them to find an occupation that lets them do what they love. And so how to do what we love with language, and at the same time, how to do what we love in the world. We may not be hyper polyglots or researchers who are going to get a job as, just in language, and we may not have the talent or extensive knowledge or interest to do that. In my case, language and social justice, finding a way to get this energy cultivated by having a way in which these 2 things feed each other, created an incredibly productive polyglot. These 2 interests or 2 obsessions really fed each other. So the message I want to give you tonight to think about is what has fed so much of our interest in language for many of us has been the immigrants we know who have been incredibly generous sharing their languages and cultures. I can say for people like me who have mainly learned languages living in the US, it's largely the immigrant communities that we meet that energize us, kind of like the polyglot video where he's on the subway and he's hearing people speak, and that really energizes us as polyglots. So I want to make an invitation to you to think about joining me and others who are in the very small number of polyglots who are in the immigrant advocacy world, and to think about, especially in today's political environment, with so many attacks against immigrants, thinking about ways you can use your skills as a polyglot to make a difference in the lives of many of these immigrants who have enriched our lives as polyglots. Let's see, slideshow, presenter, sorry. Are we good? Yeah. Whereas usually I think that the arrow goes in that direction where we're really getting a lot from immigrants, we can also give back in this political environment and make it incredibly meaningful. So thinking of the diverse ways we can do this. This could be through joining a local immigration coalition and helping them reach people through multilingual news flashes. Could be by speaking out against anti-Mexican comments. It could be by mentoring an unaccompanied minor who had to flee gang violence in El Salvador, or learning Arabic and helping fight against discrimination against Muslims, or finding ways to make the US more welcoming for the Syrian applicants for asylum that we know are heading in this direction. That's an invitation to you. And with one more slide, or not. Let's see. No, that's really it. And so that's an invitation to you. And it's very energizing to be here and to get more of this energy and synergy from you amazing polyglots. So thank you so much.
Hello. So my name's Richard Simcott, and I quite like languages. I was born in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which is probably the longest name of any country in the world. Unfortunately, the number of letters in the name of the country is not something that correlates to the number of languages that we speak as a nation. We always hear about polyglot nations like Luxembourg, where people speak 2, 3, 4, 5 languages plus. just as a matter of course. In the UK, people tend to speak a language, English. And I wasn't an exception, I grew up in a household where English was the language. But my heritage is different, and I guess that the first real contact with another language that wasn't English was at home through words from the Welsh language that was shared through the generations. Unfortunately, my great-grandparents didn't pass on the Welsh language to my grandmother because it was seen as a disadvantage. And during this conference, we've heard about similar struggles in the film about native Indian languages here in the US, where similar policies killed off languages in families that weren't passed down. But these words were passed down. And these words and the area I grew up in with various dialects, accents in the school where I was from, they really inspired me to learn to speak like other people. And that interest grew, and as I went to school and I studied French, and later Spanish, and then I went to university and I was looking in books and, grabbing whatever I could in different languages and learning about them, and going on holiday and meeting kids from Norway or Germany or wherever else, and just wanting to communicate with these kids in their languages and to be able to play, because the whole point was communication, building up human relationships, friendships, things that would last into the future. And this is what I wanted, and this is what motivated me at the beginning to learn. And I went to university and I studied a degree in combined languages, where I had to study a minimum of 3 for to the final year. And I took French, Spanish, Italian, and I also did Portuguese. And I set in on the Scandinavian degree of Swedish and Old Icelandic. And then I did language exchanges for other languages that I was studying too. And after that, I looked for other language opportunities to use my language. I was constantly seeking out opportunities. And this becomes important in the world of work, which I'll get to. Going out and then going and working as an au pair in a family in Germany, being there for the first month, the little girl comes up to me and goes, "Bitte vorlesen," please read out loud to me. She gives me this book. I've been in Germany for 1 week. Okay. Look at the book, and it's written in Old German script. Who here has seen Old German script? Okay, who here can read it even if it's in your language fluently, right? So she gave me, and I was like, she looked at me and said, huh? This little 3-year-old was like looking at me like, how can you not read? You're an adult. She says, "Ich gebe meine Schwester, ne? I'll give it to my sister." And the 7-year-old started reading it fluently. So embarrassed, but it made me want to learn more. And then I went later and I started getting jobs. I was studying different places, but then I started getting into work. And I was looking for opportunities where I could use as many of my languages as possible. Has anybody here in the audience ever seen a job advert where they say, looking for somebody who can speak 8 languages? No. It doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen. Do you know why? Yeah, how many applicants are you going to get, right? But also, many, many organizations are actually decompartmentalized. You have a region of Europe. You have the Russian team. You have the Spanish and Portuguese team maybe together. You have all these teams, and they're already organized in this way, especially for big organizations. So somebody like me and like many of you go in there, and we've got these very diverse languages. We need to use exactly these skills I was talking about of finding ways to incorporate the languages into those roles. And it's exactly what I did from the very beginning when I started working. I was working in call centers, taking calls in the beginning in German, mostly, after having been in Germany and failing to read a story to a 3-year-old. But then I was taking calls with customers and practicing my languages. Because I could take other calls in other languages, I offered my skills to the rest of the office and said, okay, look, I'll take overflow calls in French, in Spanish, in Portuguese, in Italian, in Swedish, in Danish, whatever you want, throw them at me. So my phone on my desk would ring and it would say, Sweden, and I'd have to answer the phone in Swedish. It would ring and I'd say Italy, and I'd answer the phone, buongiorno, io sono Richard Simcott, pronto. And then they go, grüß Gott. They go, oh yeah, there's that region of Italy, though they speak German. So then I'd had to switch back to German. Switzerland was a nightmare, as you can imagine. But these were really, really good tools for me to practice switching between languages. And really good for using different registers of language, using my languages in a real way, and learning that technical vocabulary to give technical support, customer support to a number of clients in a number of languages. And really, this was the bread and butter that I took moving forward. I became a network engineer. I trained as a network engineer with Novell in the Netherlands. And I was using 8 languages on a daily basis for my work. Again, offering my services to other teams to take other calls wherever I could. And then I had the bright idea to join the diplomatic service of the UK. How many languages do you think I needed to join that? Here, 1? Any advances on 1? 0. Well, yeah, they were looking for a mute. So I was really lucky. Yeah, 1 language. They were looking for me to speak English. And I got into the diplomatic service because of my knowledge of English and maths. And then I had to learn about what was going on in the world and pass interviews on, sort of political situations across the globe and present my thoughts and what was going on and my ideas. When I actually joined the Foreign Office, though, a world opened to me of diplomats from other countries, embassies in my country. I was dealing with embassies based in London. I was dealing with consulates in Edinburgh when I was doing work on global projects with the international community. And this gave me direct contact with people using the language. This wasn't something I needed to do or I had to do. But oh wow, did it really have an impact on the people coming over to my country? For me as a Brit, to represent my country and to speak in the language of all of these different diplomats coming over, fantastic. And that was it. I realized, you know what I mean? This is really what I want. I want to be able to use my languages, all of them as much as I possibly can. While I was in the UK, this worked really well. When I went to embassies abroad, it actually reduced quite a lot because I was in a British bubble speaking a lot of English and the local language, of course. So I was thinking of other ways of how I can actually use my languages. I was about to have a baby, not personally. I know I've got a great figure, I know. I let my wife do that. I delegated the task. And I delegated well. And for me, it was important to actually practice what I preach. I started making contact with people online about languages and about, what we could do. I'm not a natural translator, so translation for me wasn't a natural course. I enjoyed telling people about things, but again, I dabbled in teaching. It wasn't a natural thing. I can definitely teach, and I definitely enjoy it, but it wasn't something I wanted to do all the time in a classroom environment. So I was looking on the internet, and social media was growing. And it was growing fast. Facebook was starting, and YouTube was out there. So I started a few parallel projects. On the one hand, I found a couple of videos out there on YouTube and a couple of forums, the How to Learn Any Language forum, about polyglots. And this was something that people had called me in France years ago. Ah, tu es un polyglotte, toi? You're a polyglot. Like, am I? Didn't know. If you say so, maybe I am. But then I learned that people were using this term polyglot, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm a polyglot. And then I learned hyperpolyglot. Maybe I'm a hyperpolyglot. Oh my God, it's amazing I've been promoted in such a short space of time. This is fantastic. What else can I be? A super duper hyperpolyglot? I was wondering where this was going to go, and my dreams were just like, woo! My world was really expanding, really quite phenomenally fast. But no, actually I went back and I started making videos. I made a video in 16 languages, which a couple of people have seen since then. And I started communicating with other people who had the same passion, the same desires that I hadn't had growing up and even going to university. I didn't meet people who love languages the same way I thought I would, and I didn't. There were people who were certainly very good at languages and liked a few of them, but not to the degree I did. But all this coincided with me looking for another profession, and I saw this advert for a British company called Emoderation. And this is 7 years ago. Looking for somebody who speaks English as a native language, but also German and Spanish. And I knew that there weren't that many people who actually spoke very good German and very good Spanish in the UK. And I thought, I'm going to apply. I'm going to see what this is like. Working from home, fantastic. I'm about to have a baby. I know, seriously. I know you think it was me. It wasn't. It was my wife, honestly. It was an opportunity for me to be at home and to practice what I preached about wanting to have a multilingual environment, supporting languages, and using what I did and what I was passionate about with my child. So I applied, and Emoderation was a dream. The CEO, Tamara Littleton, a visionary person who came up to meet me. And at the time, she said, yeah, we're really, really excited to have you, and it'd be great to have you on board, and it's great to meet you in person. And in the future, I really see that you're going to have this opportunity to manage entire teams of people and to take languages and bring Emoderation and the moderation world and have it as a really multilingual thing. At the moment, it's just a few things that we have in different languages. And I was like, great, let's give it a go. And I started, and I really went with the bread and butter things of moderation. Who has heard of online moderation? So a handful of people in this room. And this is 7 years down the line from when I started. So online moderation is, if you go onto any Facebook page or Instagram, it could happen on Twitter, on YouTube. It can happen anywhere where people write about products or about services, anything online. Social media management, which is what Emoderation is in the business of doing, basically is managing those things for anything that can happen online which may cause offense, which could lead to legal issues for a company, where people are writing user-generated content that could cause problems for the company, but also for the other people using it, the other users. It could be bullying. And the thing that really struck me was child safety. Who here cares about what our kids are seeing online? Who here would be proud to represent a company that was actually defending and helping children online? That's a good show of hands. So was I, and that's exactly how I felt. Imagine I had a small baby at home, interested in using my languages. I get to do this at home. And I get to help and be part of this internet police service protecting children as well. And Emoderation offered me all of this. Little did I know that part of my job was community management. Does anybody know what community management is? Yeah? So community management is going a step further and having more of an interaction with these online communities. Maybe writing for the brand, engaging and answering questions that people have in these communities. And this is all the kind of work that we do in Emoderation. There are other branches of what we do too. We do crisis management as well with our sister company, Polyglots. So my role grew. I was learning the bread and butter of what we were doing as a moderator, community manager. And then I started leading a team. I started getting involved in marketing and seeing how our marketing team was working and advising on the languages we could support. Finding people, recruiting, branching out and really putting all the feelers of all my language skills that I developed all the way through and trying to reach out and push the boundaries within this organization, the vision that my CEO, Tamara Littleton, had for the company. And I wanted to do that, and I felt like an ambassador for the company, and I still feel that to this day, and I'm very proud to be working with the company. And I got that pride back because they support me in being here. Emoderation is one of the sponsors of this event. They see this as my work time as well because it's spreading the word in the language community of what we do and where you can actually get involved. Would you believe that I've probably brought in from the language communities that have built up over the years on my Speaking Fluently page on Facebook, through my YouTube channel, and through events like these, I've recruited possibly a couple of hundred people to work on projects as freelancers. Some people have gone on and changed in positions within the company too. And this is why I think that this is a really different job that people don't consider. But the considerations for any job that you do, there are only a couple of you in the room that even realize what moderation is. But it's actually pushing the boundaries of any job that you do. And now as the head of languages, I have a team of polyglots. How cool is that, right? It's cool. People who can look over and, you know, if languages come in that in just one shift that they're working for a client, they can look over content in various languages. We've got a couple in the room. Put your hands up. Let them see you. Fantastic. Thank you. So I do things like these. I come and I speak about what I do. I talk to the media, talk about my languages, but I talk about my work. And I'm really glad that so many of you came here to listen, to learn about Emoderation, what I do. Thank you very much for your time.
I see a question.
Hello. I have a question for the first lady that spoke. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name.
Laurence.
All right.
It's fine, I am a girl.
You said that you study computer sciences.
Yes.
Could you tell us more about that and how that plays a role in what you do with your languages and your work and stuff?
Sure. One of the reasons I studied computer science, I decided to do a master's in it, was that I was working in the games industry quite a lot. And acting in a video game is very different to normal kind of acting. And also because of my linguistics, I just love structures. It's an obsession. I'm sure there's a support group for it. But to me, it made complete sense that I should learn more about this new industry I was in, and it has helped so much. And part of it is that I don't have a sample script, but a normal script is, like for a film or for TV, it's very linear. And in a game, when you do a game, nobody knows the whole story. I was working on a game called Driver San Francisco, and the lead writer had a nervous breakdown because the game was so massive. So when I go in to do my part, I don't know what the whole story is. I only know my character. And every line is a separate sound file. So whereas normally if I go in to do a radio play, I'd be interacting with another character, and we'd have a scene, and it would have an arc, and I would cry, and they would scream, they would go off, and then they would, you know. In this, I might be doing 5 different responses to the same question, depending on what the player is going to choose. So by doing the computer science and understanding the flow of how coding worked, how the structure of a game worked, it's really informed my performance in this. Earlier this year, I was privileged to be one of the judges on a BAFTA panel to choose the best performance in a video game, because the industry is finally recognizing that the games industry is a completely different part of acting and also spans the languages and the countries. So it's a whole new genre with a whole new way of going about performing. And I just wanted to educate myself, basically. I'm also a video games ambassador, so I can talk to you after that about that.
Okay, we have time for one more question, okay?
So actually, again, to you, Laurence. I actually have two questions. First, you'd mentioned that you knew a sign language. I'm wondering what sign language that was, because as we know, sign language is not universal all over the world. And secondarily, you said that you had done dubbing for different movies for the audio. I'm wondering, in terms of the media producers, if you were aware if they also add captions, not just the subtitles for people that are not deaf, but I'm wondering also, in my experience with a French movie, they would have English subtitles, but I was wondering if they would provide French subtitles as well. Didn't know if you knew anything about that. And what I found is that it was often a frustrating experience for me, so I was just wondering if you knew about the subtitling with movies.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I studied BSL. Again, I can't quite remember why. I think I was just so fascinated, again, by the structure. My difficulty was it's a very particular community, and it's a very political community in the UK. So it's one of those things where you really do have to do it every day. And I was doing it because I was really interested in it, but I wasn't good enough to do anything more with it. So unfortunately, it slipped away. Now, the subtitling is a separate thing. It's a very good thing. I know that the BBC has an entire department that does subtitling. I know this because at one point I went for a job. And when they heard that I might dip out to do my acting work, I didn't make it farther than that. So I know that there's a lot of English support. I don't think there's quite as much in other languages. And that is, again, that's something that's awareness that needs to be brought to other countries. Again, it's one of those things of getting people to think about access, particularly with new media, and particularly with websites. And it's not just about doing stuff in different languages, it's about doing stuff for people who are differently abled. And I think one of the things you can do is keep bringing this up, because it's a really, really important issue. And there should be captioning, closed captioning, for other languages. There's a company in London that does called VSI Script International, and I know that they are working on closed captioning in other languages, but they're the only company I know. I hope that helps.
I think you know what time it is. We're going to be staying in this room. Thank you so much to our panelists.